Good evening and welcome. I'm Ann Walters Robertson, Dean of the Division of the Humanities at the University of Chicago, and it's my very great pleasure to welcome you to our Spring Dean's Salon. The Humanities Division offers an annual series of Dean's Salons to highlight the work of our distinguished faculty. Through the study and practice of the arts, language, literature, music, philosophy, and more, the Humanities Division explores the ideas that shape and define us. This exploration is how we make the world and ourselves ready for change and build a better future. I'm thrilled all of you have joined us to hear our speaker, Philip Bohlman, tell us about the Eurovision Song Contest. Phil is the Ludwig Rosenberger Distinguished Service Professor in Jewish History, Music, and the Humanities in the College at the University of Chicago. He's a prolific scholar, authoring or editing more than a dozen books so far. Moreover, as artistic director of the new Budapest Orpheum Society, a Jewish cabaret and ensemble in residence at U Chicago, he has released 4 CDs, including most recently As Dreams Fall Apart, The Golden Age of Jewish Stage and Film Music, 1925 to 55, which was nominated for a Grammy. Phil is a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and a corresponding fellow of the British Academy. I'm also proud to say that he is my colleague in the music department and someone I have thoroughly enjoyed working with and learning from over the years. Phil will illuminate for us today hidden aspects of the Eurovision Song Contest. Now, this talk is particularly well timed. The semifinals for the 2021 Eurovision are underway. The first semifinal was yesterday and the next is tomorrow, with the grand finale taking place in Rotterdam this Saturday, May 22nd. Some of you may know, and I think Phil will touch on this, that since 2004, Phil has taught a very successful undergraduate course on the Eurovision Song Contest at U Chicago. Now, you may be wondering how Phil came to be interested in Eurovision. I've learned that Phil's fascination with Eurovision dates back nearly 40 years, when he was a student in Israel working on his dissertation. While there, Phil became acquainted with a group of European émigrés with whom he played chamber music. One Saturday evening, his friends told him they could not play music with Phil as they usually did, since they had to watch Eurovision. Phil was surprised and fascinated by his friends' passion and commitment to Eurovision, and soon began to incorporate it into his own work on the intersection of music, identity, and nationalism. Now, throughout tonight's presentation, we want to hear from you, and we look forward to your thoughts and questions. Please feel free to add your comments throughout the discussion using the Q&A function in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. We'll have time for questions following Phil's talk, and I know he's eager to hear what's on your minds. Also, you'll note that there are French texts that are being played tonight, and every time a new text comes on, you will have in the chat a translation. So if you want to click on your chat, you'll be able to follow the words a little more easily. And now I'm excited to turn the virtual podium over to Phil for this evening's talk.
Every Eurovision Song Contest event, from the circulation of individual songs to the annual concours Eurovision de les chansons begins with the fanfare you just heard, taken from Marc-Antoine Charpentier's Te Deum in D major, composed during the final decade of the 17th century. The Charpentier fanfare symbolically opens the door to the time and place of the Eurovision Song Contest, a world with both everyday and longue durée dimensions, a continental landscape across which both past and present converge. The Eurovision world is vast, and the voices that fill it are diverse. Some of those voices emanate from nations that seek European and global power, most notably Russia. Some seek to win a seat at the European Union political and economic table, North Macedonia and Moldova, for example. There are voices that call attention to the political, Europe's systemic racism and the refugee crisis. Others celebrate the Eurovision's aesthetic and performative debt to queerness. More than a few voices sing just to be heard or not to be forgotten. Surely the case with Bosnia-Herzegovina, and in a different way, say, San Marino, whose population of some 34,000 is about half that of Oak Park, the Chicago suburb in which I live. Those inhabiting the Eurovision world, even during this very week, bear witness to the power of song, the meaning it gives to Europe in Johann Gottfried Herder's prophetic words when inventing folk and popular music at the end of this 18th century. Song loves the masses. We are perched today between the first and second semifinal competitions, which will lead to the grand finale on Saturday. Every day this week, growing audiences worldwide populate the Eurovision world, joining through their national broadcasting networks, which together mediate the Eurovision Song Contest to the world under the auspices of the European Broadcasting Union, the largest transnational media network in the world. It's membership in the EBU that opens the door to participating in the Eurovision Song Contest. If you've ever wondered why Azerbaijan or Israel could compete, now you know, because of their EBU memberships. We enter the Eurovision world from many different places, but uncannily, those whose voices come to love song do so through rites of passage that the Charpentier and 65 years of national entries symbolize. Perhaps a very brief history of the longest running televised music competition in the world is in order. The history of the Eurovision unfolds like a text for the Cold War, the one following the division of Europe after World War II, and now the new Cold War, in which Europe once again struggles under the weight of divisiveness and division. The first song contest took place in neutral Switzerland in 1956 against the backdrop of the Soviet invasions of Hungary and Czechoslovakia. Nations of the Soviet bloc did not take part in the early Eurovisions, but rather supported their own versions, such as the Intervision Song Contest. As a competition of nation against nation, the Eurovision provides a remarkably dense record of historical events. Student protests in the 1960s, war in the Middle East and in Southeast Asia, the collapse of state socialism at the end of the 1980s, civil war in Southeastern Europe, Russian aggression in the Baltic states, Georgia, and Ukraine. In the histories that accumulate as song lyrics and through the circulation of videos that transform the local into the transnational, nationalism takes many forms, multiplying as the historical voices of the age of nationalism. I'd like to invite you to witness a few of the cases of the complex nationalisms that have arisen from the politics of the new Cold War, particularly in the competition of two Eurovision powerhouses, Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine entered the 2016 Eurovision with a song called 1944, sung by a remarkable singer with extensive vocal training, Jamala, who was a Ukrainian of Crimean Tatar heritage. The 1944 of the title was an historical reference to the Soviet deportation of Tatars from Crimea near the end of World War II. That 1944 actually referred to events 80 years later in 2014, the Russian annexation of Ukrainian Crimea, and once again, the deportation of Muslim Tatars was lost on no one. So much so that Jamala's 1944 was chosen as the winning song. The nationalist conflict between Ukraine and Russia was particularly clear in the lyrics of the song itself, which we see here, the first verse and the refrain. The English lyrics in the main body of the introductory verse describe the act of deportation explicitly and brutally. In the refrain, Jamala switches to the Tatar language, both symbolic and legible, as a Turkic language to Turkish and Azerbaijani viewers. The performance you just saw, moreover, was the reprise at the end of the grand finale, which had a global audience of hundreds of millions. When strangers are coming, they come to your house, they kill you all and say, "We're not guilty, not guilty." Whereas your mind, humanity cries, "You think you are gods, but everyone dies. Don't swallow my soul, our souls." And then the Tatar refrain. Notwithstanding the remarkable range of the cultural, political, and ideological work achieved by a Eurosong and its capacity to expand public and private horizons of gender and sexuality, each song that competes in the Eurovision is the result of complex social and musical interactions with the several communities that make up what I call the Eurosong matrix. We might think, though, those who inhabit this matrix as aesthetic and interpretive agents who listen to and interact with each other in order to create a song and performance in the name of a nation. Among the most active of these agents are surely the following: the singer-songwriter, her or himself, the performers, those who experience as listeners and auditors, audiences at home and in the crowds who attend public song festivals, the countless fan clubs, the mediators who resituate song in society because of its mobility, performing covers and parodies, performing their own versions on YouTube. The agents of historicism, the griots, the singers of tales, so to speak, who inscribe European history through processes such as revival. When shaping a Eurosong, these diverse communities of agents also generate different types of temporality, among them 6 that transform Eurovision time to the history of the present. And we might look at these on the next slide. First, there is musical time. Second, historical time. Third, ritual time. Fourth, cyclical time. Fifth, performative or embodied time. And then finally, monumental time, epic time, as it's so important in European song. The six temporalities also form three sets of pairs, which you see on the screen in front of you, each of them representing the contrasting relation of object to subject, thus containing multiple phenomena for the expression of meaning. Let's think about these ideas of time in history while listening to and watching the official video for Armenia's 2015 entry in the Eurovision, Face the Shadow, which was released on April 24th, 2015, the 100th anniversary to the day of the Armenian genocide during World War I, April 24, 1915. Performed in 6 different musical styles by singers of Armenian heritage living in diaspora, performing under the name Genealogy, the song follows all the rules governing a eurosong with absolute precision. We'll see now the introductory verse and then cut to the bridge, which gives way to the outro that closes the circle of a century of Armenian history.
We find so many ways of fooling our heart, playing too many games, trying to hide. When you follow a dream, surrender the sorrow inside, face every shadow you denied.
Feels like so many times life was unfair. Will you run and forget all the despair?
If it's breaking you down, remember the power inside. Face every shadow you denied. Time is ticking and you keep thinking that you are taking your heart.
There is a remarkable paradox that accompanies the competition lying at the heart of the Eurovision Song Contest. Each nation must represent its own sense of national identity and the traits that make it different and distinctive, while at the same time sounding the common culture and history of Europe. In other words, a sameness with all other competing nations. The structure of each song and performance, moreover, makes this paradox even more complex. The basic rules governing the structure of each song must function to allow translation of the song into metaphors for nation and nationalism. The basic rules for a Eurovision song are the following. Each song must be exactly 3 minutes to the second. No more than 6 performers may be on the stage at one time. Singers perform live. Instrumentalists do not perform live. Instrumental accompaniment may include more performers than those on the stage. Deliberate political gestures are not allowed. The aesthetic and musical questions that must be answered to resolve the Eurosong paradox are themselves vexing. Does one sing in a language that all nations will understand, or in the language of one's own nation? Does this differ when national languages are barely known beyond the borders, for example, Estonian, as opposed to those internationally used in popular music, for example, Spanish? What if there are multiple languages for a nation such as Belgium, Israel, or Switzerland? Last year's Israeli entry, sung by Aiden Aleni, an Israeli woman of Ethiopian Falasha heritage, included 4 languages: Amharic and Arabic, English, and Hebrew. I might note here that Switzerland almost always performs in French, not in German or Romansh, or Italian. Is a national song or dance form too folky or unintelligible, or is it possible to translate transnational genres into national forms? I've spent years trying to sort out these questions and find answers for them, but tonight I'll turn to a concluding set of songs from only one nation, France, to illustrate how widely variant resolutions to the Eurosong paradox can be. I begin with an unequivocally French chanson. Its indebtedness to Parisian cabaret, undeniable, especially when personified by the great French cabaret singer and film star, Patricia Cass. Just a bit of there will be translations in the captions, but just to give you a sense of this incredible language of the song, which is called Et s'il fallait le faire, and if it had to be done. S'il fallait le faire, j'arrêterais la terre. Dans un désert sans vie, je trouverais la mer. If it had to be done, I would stop the earth. In a desert without life, I would find the sea. Let's listen to Patricia Cass singing Et s'il fallait le faire.
S'il fallait le faire, j'arrêterais la terre. J'éteindrais la lumière, que tu restes endormi. S'il fallait pour te plaire, t'écouter chaque nuit. Quand tu parles d'amour, j'en parlerai aussi. Que tu regardes encore dans le fond de mes yeux, que tu y vois encore le plus grand des grands feux, et que ta main se colle sur ma peau où elle veut. Un jour, si tu t'envoles, je suivrai si je peux.
The total number of songs that have competed in the Eurovision Song Contest now exceeds 1,500, and more than 40 nations have competed annually for the past decade, altogether complicating any decision to represent the Eurovision in the age of nationalism this evening. Ultimately, however, I concluded that France might lead us toward our own grand finale on this Wednesday of Eurovision Week 2021. 2 considerations guided my choice of France. First of all, we in the Humanities Division are well aware of Anne Robertson's love of all things French, song and the music very much among them. Though not with Anne's passion and knowledge, I confess that I too share a love of French song. There's a second reason as well, one important for us tonight. French participation in the Eurovision counters many of the misconceptions and prejudices mustered to dismiss the song contest. Chief among them, of course, is the claim that the Eurovision has been totally Americanized. The 4 French Eurovision songs we hear tonight also bolster my claim that France consistently competes with songs that do their work musically in quite compelling and beautiful ways. Surely we witnessed such beauty in the 2009 entry of Patricia Cass. We shall hear it also in the songs of Bilal Hassani, Madame Monsieur, and Barbara Pravi. Critically, moreover, each of these songs expresses Frenchness in its own ways, locating it historically and aesthetically in a larger Europe. From 2009, then, let's jump to 2019, the last year in which the Eurovision Song Contest took place. We'll hear the song Roi, King, performed by Bilal Hassani, a French singer of North African and Muslim heritage, here mixing the personae and identities of a cabaret singer and a drag queen. Let's hear Bilal Hassani singing Roi. Despite the restrictions placed on political expression in Eurosongs by the European Broadcasting Union, many performers do insist on a freedom of expression that enables them to act as a moral compass for national and international crises. Many songs competing this year, which is to say this week, address such crises directly and unequivocally. There's a significant increase in performers of color, whose presence on the Eurovision stage bears witness to the systemic racism of colonialism and the rise of the political right across Europe. The coronavirus pandemic, which led to the suspension of last year's Eurovision, now emerges as common cause. Over the course of many years, French entries have been particularly notable for the ways they embody the moral compass of the Eurovision Song Contest. Singers from the colonial département, the French Outre-mer, many musicians of color are called on to represent the nation's core. Corsicans have sung in Corsican. Muslims from the banlieue, the North African suburbs of Paris and Marseille, perform with frequency. From the many entries I might have chosen to illustrate this moral compass, I'll turn to just one from 2018, performed by the duo Madame Monsieur. Already from its title and title character, a refugee child born at sea, Mercy, we know this song will use wordplay with merci to draw us into the European refugee crisis, the crossing of the Mediterranean, the sea between deux pays, two lands, Europe and its others. And Robertson was quick to remind us earlier, before, as we were chatting before we went live, of the long tradition of this kind of wordplay within French song, which has a centuries-old tradition. We hear it, for example, in the first verse. Je suis né ce matin, je m'appelle Merci, au milieu de la mer, entre deux pays, merci. I was born this morning, my name is Mercy, in the middle of the sea between two countries, Mercy. You have a chance to look at that text again, the translation, and we'll watch Madame Monsieur singing Mercy. I hope that those of you listening this evening who were preparing to ask about my predictions for winners and losers when we turn to the Q&A later will forgive me if I preempt their questions by confessing that I'm an utter failure when it comes to predictions. In 2018, I believed, however, stopped short of predicting that Madame Monsieur's Merci, which you just saw, would do very well. It did not do particularly well, and reasons can be identified. There was no dance in it. It was rather a simple version of a boy-girl song. My insecurity about predicting notwithstanding, I'm willing to talk about my favorites, and I do so this evening within the context of the excursion through the French Eurovision songs with Anne Robertson. Among my favorite songs this year, if truth be told, my favorite, is the French entry Barbara Pravi's Voilà. Voilà is a wonderful mix, richly expressive of French chanson and cabaret, yet evocative of its own European moment. Text and context form a counterpoint that captures the intimacy of the self while choreographing the public face of an unsettled world and the cruel anonymity of those who sojourn in it. Écoutez-moi, moi la chanteuse à demi, parlez de moi à vos amours, à vos amis. Me voilà dans le bruit et dans le silence. Again, the text, the translation will be in the chat.
Écoutez-moi, moi la chanteuse à demi, parlez de moi, à vos amours, à vos amis, parlez-leur de cette fille aux yeux noirs et de son rêve fou. Moi ce que je veux, c'est écrire des histoires qui arrivent jusqu'à vous, c'est tout. Voilà, 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 voilà qui je suis. Me voilà même si, mise à nu j'ai peur, oui. Me voilà dans le bruit et dans le silence. Regardez-moi, ou du moins ce qu'il en reste. Regardez-moi, avant que je me déteste. Quoi vous dire que les lèvres d'une autre ne vous diront pas? C'est peu de choses, mais moi, tout ce que j'ai, je le dépose là. Voilà. Voilà, 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 voilà qui je suis. Me voilà même si, mise à nu c'est fini. C'est ma gueule, c'est mon cri. Me voilà, tant pis. Ici, moi, mon rêve, mon envie, comme j'en crève, comme j'en ris, me voilà dans le bruit et dans le silence.
Eurovision week will come to a close on Saturday with the grand finale in Rotterdam, when the 2021 winner, breathlessly and without skipping a beat, will set a new Eurovision year in motion. Almost as quickly on the morning after, there will be news reports from the American media with an increasingly frequent story in which we hear of reports that the United States will join the Eurovision Song Contest, or indeed organize and stage its own Eurovision. Such reports have already been voiced and appeared in the media. But I feel that the American call misses some of the basic issues of what it is that makes the Eurovision Song Contest so powerful. Please know that I will resist closing my remarks this evening by observing that the Eurovision could not, in fact, form everyday worlds in the United States. Surely very much at the University of Chicago, which increasingly is, for me, and a generation of students, a Eurovision world formed of our common and uncommon identities. This week, even during the pandemic, there will be Eurovision parties across campus, some in person, others online, all taking ownership of the media that bring Rotterdam to Chicago. For a number of years, moreover, I've taught a course on the Eurovision Song Contest for several years, and again next year as a signature course in the college. In that course, you will see students gather with their own Eurovision experiences, and work toward final projects in which they stage and perform what we call Chicago Vision. As we inhabit these Chicago Eurovision worlds, we also realize many of the most critical issues of our day. Increasingly, the struggles to respond to systemic racism and the inequalities that song so forcefully, Eurovision song, Chicago song, can voice in the fullness that we know when song loves the masses. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Phil, for a wonderful talk. I know I learned a great deal about Eurovision and learned to see dimensions of it that I hadn't understood. We're all eager for your questions, so please continue to send them to us. I have quite a few already. Please keep them coming through the Q&A function. And let's start with this one. When you suggest that the United States has only recently awakened to the global reach of the Eurovision Song Contest, aren't you perhaps exaggerating just a little bit? After all, the breakthrough performance for Celine Dion took place at the Eurovision in 1988 when she sang the winning song for Switzerland. Granted, Celine Dion is Canadian, not American, but she's also not Swiss.
When speaking about the Eurovision, it's often appropriate, in fact, to exaggerate. And so I don't apologize, but let me sort of bring the question of Americanness even to the south side of Chicago. There are two rather well-known cases in which the south side of Chicago contributed to the Eurovision. One of them in 2006, when Eddie Butler, an African-American of the Jewish faith, who had immigrated to Israel, sang for Israel and sang a gospel song, very much in the tradition of Chicago gospel. But the best known one, and many of those who are watching tonight will know of this, is of course the time in 1994 in the Intermission Act when Riverdance performed. Riverdance, of course, is a South Side Chicago step dance, Irish step dance tradition, and it performed in Dublin during the intermission and became world famous after this. Michael Flatley is from the South Side of Chicago. So indeed, there are these connections even to the South Side of Chicago.
Oh, that's a really fascinating connection. I didn't know that Riverdance had this connection. How wonderful. Here's another question. How has regional block voting evolved during the history of the Eurovision Song Contest? And do you envision that this common and sometimes criticized practice will continue to evolve?
It certainly will continue to evolve. So block voting is the type of voting that occurs when, say, the Scandinavian nations, the Nordic nations, vote for each other and predictably in this sort of way. When the nations of the former Soviet Union vote for each other, Azerbaijan, you might think would vote for Turkey before it would vote for Russia, but of course it has long connections to Russia and Belarus and the other countries. I think for this, as long as politics become a part of the Eurovision, block voting will continue, but it shifts and it changes. It goes in unexpected directions, and in this sense, I don't expect it to change, to disappear, but to change. The movement, the mobility of migrant workers, for example, is one of the reasons that we see different types of blocks, different types of alliances forming in the voting patterns themselves. When Ireland votes for Poland because of the many Polish workers in Ireland, to take an example, or Germany votes for Turkey because of the many Turkish residents of Germany.
Ah, great, thank you. Here's another question. What elements of the contest particularly appeal to gays, would you say? And do they perhaps come to see themselves as a nation in part through this and similar enthusiasms?
So the answer is certainly yes. There are many ways in which the Eurovision discourses and organizations work. And one is a sort of bottom up. And it's here that LGBTQ communities of various kinds, whether they're fan clubs, whether they're political action groups, work very closely with the Eurovision, very much create narratives that last through the entire year. Sometimes these are a matter of the ways in which sexuality and gender identification is expressed in songs themselves. We saw this with the Hilal, with the Hosseini song, Bilal Hassani song earlier. But we also see it in the way in which there's resistance, for example, from this incredibly large body of fans to staging the Eurovision in Russia, with its tremendous political oppression of gays and lesbians and queers.
Oh, that's great. Now here's a question that is very up to the moment, I would say. There have been many exchanges on social media on the Israeli entry that qualified yesterday. Some commentators are calling for boycott, divest, sanction, BDS to be applied in the Eurovision context. Others are noting that the title "Set Me Free" is inappropriate given the current conflict with Palestine. The response to "Set Me Free" in the Rotterdam arena seemed warm. The song itself is very strong and the main singer very compelling. Do you see this particular conflict not affecting the song's performance in the competition? And if so, can you account for that?
I can't predict what the response will be in the final performance, and then in the voting that responds to it. Voting is a response that happens from each country. Each country accumulates its votes and casts a vote. The very fact that the singer won yesterday, advanced to the finals, is a very good example of this. The song itself, the politics of Israel have always been very complicated, but so have they with many, as we saw this evening, many different countries as well. Israel tries to work through politics in very different ways. The video of this particular performance, which has been in the works. Remember, this woman would she should have performed last year as well. So the choice she is of African heritage, and the video actually reflects an engagement with African guest workers from Africa in the Tel Aviv urban area as well. So the politics are very, very complicated, and surely the present conflict with Gaza makes them even more complicated. Sometimes Israeli songs have responded directly to these, as in 2009, when the Israeli singer, the Jewish singer Noah, and the Palestinian singer Mira Awad sang a song directly about the incursion into Gaza that had happened 3 months earlier.
Wow, fascinating. Well, now this is a small digression, but I have to read this. It says, "Not a question, but just want to affirm to the group that Phil's course rocks. Thank you, Phil."
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Let's see, we have another question here. Do you have a couple of questions about Americanization and American versions? So I'll try to put these together. Do you have any thoughts on the American version of the contest set to premiere in 2022? And then another person asks us, what does it mean that people are worried that Eurovision might become Americanized? How would Americanization manifest itself in Eurovision?
Let me answer the second question first. There has long been this fear, this assertion that Eurovision was becoming Americanized. One type of evidence is the use of English. The other is the use of certain kinds of genres of songs that are connected to American popular music as well. Gospel, for example, is a very good case of this, where you have Swedish singers singing gospel or blues songs. The dominant form is the popular song form, the AABA form, which is connected to American popular song, American musical theater. I would argue it actually goes back to the London stage at the beginning of the 19th century, but I don't think anyone's remembering this at this point. But this Americanization doesn't seem to have stopped exactly the types of songs we heard from France tonight, which I think no one would argue were none of these songs was actually Americanized. The question of what will happen if indeed this competition in 2022 does happen will be very interesting. The organizers, interestingly enough, even though it's predicted that it's planned to be on NBC Peacock, are individuals within the European Broadcasting Union. In other words, those who have actually worked with the Eurovision. So I think the question for me is going to be, to what extent, if there is an America vision, to what extent will it be Europeanized?
Here's another interesting comment. The singer for North Macedonia this year, Vasil, grew up and performed in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. He did later move to the UK, but he's Chicago raised. So there's another Chicago connection.
Great, fantastic.
Yeah. Here's a wonderful question that talks about the connection to film. Lots of North Americans became recently familiar with the Eurovision because of the Netflix movie. How does the movie help function as a catalyst for triggering thoughts about nationalism?
It's a wonderful movie in a way. Ronnie, it came out more or less right at this time last year. And at a time when the Eurovision Song Contest itself didn't happen. And so it sort of stepped in and filled a gap. The Eurovision entry song that these two Icelandic singers, Will Ferrell and Rachel McAdams, sang actually was a nominee for the best song in the Academy Awards. It did not win. And I don't think ever had a chance to win. And perhaps there's a cue there. There was a great deal of parody that we witnessed in this film. It's a film well worth watching, I must say. And it does many of the things that we associate with the Eurovision Song Contest. For example, what I described as historicism. There's a scene in which a number of earlier winners perform together. So there's this constant reference to the past and how Europe, in a certain sense, what does song mean for Europe? What does it mean for the local? The Icelandic song, which is just a song from a small village on the north coast of Iceland. What does it mean in the competition for the high stakes of record contracts and European politics?
Right. And this is going to have to be our last question, I'm afraid, but thank you so much. The questions have been very, very lively and very interesting too. In purely musical terms, Europop seems to dominate. The French voice has long been established as individual, but how can other voices find their individual place?
This is a fabulous question because it's one that I've only lately started to think about it. And I was helped this morning. I'm teaching a seminar on the cabaret this morning, and Chris Batterman, one of our students, was presenting Portugal and the way in which a Portuguese voice has really emerged in the last 5 years. I mean, we're speculating about this. So this is a voice that has recently emerged, actually, and has a certain kind of quality to it that a sound quality in the voice itself that we can associate then with Portugal in the Eurovision Song Contest. And so the Irish voices have come and gone. They were very influential in the 1990s, when not only there was a string of Irish victories, but Irish songs were sung by other countries to capture that voice, such as Norway. So this is a really intriguing question about how voice can become a Eurovision voice, and hence can come to voice the nation in new ways.
Yeah, wonderful. Both the question and the answer. Thank you both. Well, this has been a marvelous discussion. Thank you again, Phil, and thanks to all of you for your questions and your ideas. We will resume our Dean Salon series in October, and I look forward to announcing the speaker and topic soon. But let me just say that we have had quite a year, particularly I can point out that our last 2 Dean Salons have spanned a huge amount of time. You'll remember, those of you who were with us in February, that we had a speaker, Susanna Paulus, who spoke about buying a house in ancient Babylon. And now we've jumped so many centuries and so many cultures, really, to talk about the Eurovision contest tonight. In between, I have over 200 colleagues in 15 departments, each of whom is doing brilliant, astonishing work in any number of areas. And I'm so glad we're able to present this to you in the form of these Dean Salons. So also, let me take this opportunity to ask you to save October 16th, 2021 for our annual Humanities Day Festival. For more than 40 years, the Division of Humanities has hosted Humanities Day, a day-long celebration of the humanities that showcases the power of art, literature, language, music, philosophy, and more to illuminate our shared humanity. This year, our keynote address will be delivered by Professor Wu Hong, a world-renowned art historian who will tell us more about China's cultural heritage. Humanities Day is free and open to all members of the public, and I hope to see you there. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you are keeping safe and in good spirits, and I hope to see all of you again very soon.